My name is Rachel Miller, and I'm 46 years old. I've lived in the same coastal town in North Carolina my whole life, close enough to my parents to see them on weekends, yet far enough that I thought I'd built my own space. I never imagined that one casual conversation with my younger sister, Anna, would open a wound I didn't even know was still bleeding. It was a Tuesday evening in early spring, the kind of evening when the air smells faintly of salt from the ocean, and you leave the kitchen window cracked just enough to hear the faint hum of cars passing by. I'd just set down my phone after scrolling through recipes, determined to surprise my parents with something special for their upcoming 30th wedding anniversary. I dialed Anna, expecting her to share in my excitement. She answered on the third ring, her voice a little rushed, as if she was in the middle of folding laundry or cleaning something. "Hey, guess what?" I said, practically grinning into the phone. "I can't wait for tomorrow night. I've been looking forward to this dinner for weeks." There was a pause. Not long, but long enough for me to notice. "Rachel," she finally said, her tone strange, half puzzled, half uncomfortable. "What dinner?" "The anniversary dinner," I replied quickly, assuming she'd just forgotten. "Mom and Dad's. We're all meeting at the steakhouse, remember?" Another pause. This one stretched. I could hear her dryer buzzing in the background. Then she exhaled softly, almost like she was bracing herself. "Rachel, that was last week." Her words landed like a stone thrown through glass. My smile vanished. For a second, I honestly thought she was joking, or maybe I'd misheard. "What do you mean, last week?" I asked, my throat tightening. "They already had it," she said quickly, as if hurrying to rip off a bandage. "It was last Friday. We all went. You didn't know." The world around me seemed to blur. My legs weakened, and I pulled out a chair at the kitchen table, lowering myself into it like my body couldn't hold itself up anymore. "No," I whispered. "I didn't know." On the other end, Anna went quiet. The silence between us was so heavy it felt like another presence in the room. I could hear her swallow, could practically picture her fiddling with her sleeve or avoiding eye contact if she'd been in front of me. Finally, she muttered, "I thought someone told you." "Maybe Mom assumed." Her voice trailed off. Assumed. That word rang in my ears like a cruel echo. They had planned the entire thing, invited everyone, except me. I wanted to ask questions, to scream, to demand why. But all I managed to say was, "So everyone was there." "Yeah," she admitted softly. "Me, Mark, the kids. Uncle David flew in. It was nice. They did the cake and speeches and all that." I pictured it in my head. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, the family gathering around a table. My parents blowing out candles, everyone clapping, the photographer catching the smiles. And me, completely absent. Not even missed. My chest ached as though someone had pressed down hard on it, and nobody thought to call me. My voice cracked. Anna stayed silent again, and then finally said, "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to," I whispered, my throat burning. "You've already said it." We hung up not long after. The moment the call ended, I just sat there at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. My hands trembled, and tears blurred my vision, though I tried to blink them back. I wasn't sure which hurt more, the fact that they had celebrated without me, or the realization that nobody cared enough to notice my absence. For a while, I tried to convince myself maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Mom thought I couldn't come. Maybe they sent an invitation that got lost. I even checked my email, my text messages, my voicemail, every possible place they might have left a note. Nothing. The worst part, I remembered Mom calling me earlier that week, asking casually if I was keeping busy. Not a word about the dinner. Not a hint. She'd chosen silence over inclusion. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept tossing, turning, staring at the ceiling while shadows stretched across the room. My mind replayed Anna's words like a cruel recording. It was last week. By midnight, I was pacing the living room, clutching an old photo album from when I was a kid. Pictures of family birthdays, vacations, Christmas mornings. I studied my own face in those photos, sometimes smiling, sometimes standing a little apart from the others. Suddenly, the gaps made sense. Maybe I'd always been the one left out, and I'd been too hopeful to see it. Around 2 in the morning, I made tea, though I didn't drink it. I just held the mug, staring out the window into the dark street. I thought about calling Mom, demanding answers, but the fear of hearing indifference in her voice stopped me. What if she shrugged it off? What if she didn't even see it as wrong? The following day, I went to work as usual, pretending everything was fine. I smiled at coworkers, nodded at small talk, but inside I was unraveling. Every time someone mentioned family or weekend plans, I felt my chest tighten again. I kept picturing that dinner table, the empty seat where I should have been. That evening, when I came home, there was a voicemail on my landline. My parents, cheerful as ever, reminding me to check in more often. Not a word about the dinner. Not even a slip. As if nothing had happened. I sat on the couch, phone in my hand, listening to their voices echo in my living room. My jaw clenched. Something in me shifted that night, a mix of heartbreak and anger. I realized this wasn't just about one missed dinner. This was about years of being an afterthought, years of silence swallowing my place in this family. And as that realization sank in, so did something else. This moment, the shock of being forgotten so easily, would become the turning point I never saw coming. I didn't know how yet, but deep down, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't go back to pretending anymore. I couldn't go back to pretending anymore. The walls of my living room seemed to close in, and with nothing but silence around me, my mind began to wander places I'd buried for years. Memories I thought I'd outgrown returned with an edge sharper than before. It was as if that missed dinner had pulled back a curtain, forcing me to see a lifetime of moments where I'd been set aside, passed over, or dismissed. I was 10 years old again, standing on the school gym floor in a brand new blue leotard. It was the night of my gymnastics recital, and I'd been practicing for weeks. I kept craning my neck toward the bleachers, searching for my parents' faces. The music started, and I went through the routine, cartwheels, handstands, a shaky backbend, trying to focus, trying not to stumble. When it ended, the other kids ran to their parents, beaming as cameras flashed. My mom and dad, they weren't there. Hours later, I walked into our house clutching my participation ribbon, only to find them sitting in the living room, watching TV. We got caught up with errands, Mom had said casually, as if it were nothing. That ribbon is still tucked away in a showbox upstairs, its edges curled and faded. Even now, the memory cuts like glass. Another one surfaces, my high school graduation. My classmates cheered as families waved posters and snapped photos. I spotted my parents halfway back in the crowd, seated stiffly with polite smiles, clapping without much enthusiasm. Afterward, when other families gathered for pictures, laughter, and hugs, Mom tugged at my sleeve. Let's not stay long. We've got dinner reservations, she'd said. Not for me, not with me, just with some family friends. I posed for one quick photo in my cap and gown, then watched them hurry toward the parking lot. The frame still hangs in the hallway of their house, but every time I look at it, I don't see pride. I see absence. I pushed those moments down for years, convincing myself they didn't matter. But sitting alone now, I felt each one resurface like a bruise pressed too hard. The strangest part was how ordinary these slights had felt back then. At 22, when I got my first real job, I called my parents, giddy with excitement. Dad's response was short. Good. At least you won't have to lean on us. No congratulations. No pride. Just a reminder that I wasn't supposed to need anything. And when I brought home my first serious boyfriend, instead of questions or interest, Mom had whispered to Anna, thinking I couldn't hear, she's always trying too hard. I'd learned to laugh those things off, to shrug and keep moving, but now they came flooding back like a storm. At one point, I pulled the old photo album closer again, A picture slipped out, me and Anna at Christmas, ages maybe 8 and 12. She was unwrapping a dollhouse, the kind with painted shutters and little wooden furniture. I was opening a sweater 2 sizes too big. The photo caught my forced smile, the kind a kid learns to wear when she realizes she's not supposed to ask for more. The sound of my phone buzzing on the counter jolted me back. A message from Anna lit up the screen. "You okay?" I stayed at it for a long time, my fingers hovering. Finally, I typed back, "I don't think so." Seconds later, she called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Rachel?" Her voice was cautious. "Yeah," I said softly. "I shouldn't have told you like that yesterday," she murmured. "It just slipped out." I let out a dry laugh. "It didn't just slip out, Anna. It happened. Whether you told me or not, they left me out." She sighed. "You've always taken things harder than me. Maybe Mom figured it would be easier not to," she trailed off. "Not to what?" I snapped. "Not to hurt me, because ignoring me isn't easier. It's worse." On the other end, I heard her kids playing in the background. Anna lowered her voice. "Sometimes I think they just expect less from you. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, in what way could that possibly be good?" I cut in, my chest burning. She went quiet. Then, softly, "I'm sorry, Rachel. I really am." For a moment, I almost believed her. But the apology wasn't hers to give. After we hung up, I wandered upstairs, drawn to the closet where I kept old boxes. I pulled one down and sat on the floor, sifting through scraps of a childhood I'd tried to preserve. Birthday cards signed with quick, generic notes. A science fair ribbon bent in half. A Polaroid of me at 14, holding up a painting I'd worked on for months, one they never hung on the wall. Each item felt like proof of a pattern I'd spent my whole life ignoring. They hadn't just forgotten me at a dinner. They had been forgetting me for decades, in small, deliberate ways that accumulated until my place in the family blurred into the background. The more I remembered, the harder it became to breathe. I thought about the holidays where Anna got center stage, the job promotions nobody asked me about, the birthdays celebrated with lukewarm calls instead of visits. I thought about the way Mom praised Anna's cooking, her children, her perfect house, while my achievements went unnoticed. And beneath all that, the quiet resentment I'd buried twisted into something sharper. For years, I told myself families weren't perfect, that I was being too sensitive, that maybe I expected too much. But now, staring at these faded reminders, I realized the truth was simpler. They had chosen me as the expendable one. The one left off the invitation list. The one whose absence didn't matter. I sat there on the floor until the daylight faded and the room grew dim. Shadows stretched long across the carpet, and I felt a weight settle in my chest. It wasn't just grief. It was recognition. These memories weren't just old hurts. They were warnings. And if I didn't face them now, they would keep cutting deeper, long after the wounds had healed on the surface. They would keep cutting deeper, long after the wounds had healed on the surface. That thought stayed with me as the house grew darker around me. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat there on the carpet, my back against the closet door, my hands resting on the old box of memories. The silence pressed in, thick and heavy, until even the creak of the floorboards upstairs sounded like a scream. For the first time in a long while, I didn't reach for the phone. No call to my parents, no attempt to clear the air. Normally, I would have tried to soften things, to patch the holes, to make sure no one felt uncomfortable. But tonight, I didn't. I let the silence stand between us, wide and cold, and it terrified me how natural it felt. The next morning, I carried that silence like a weight draped across my shoulders. I went through the motions, making coffee, opening the curtains, answering work emails. But everything seemed muffled, like I was moving underwater. My phone buzzed a few times with group messages from Anna, updates about her kids, a funny picture of her youngest holding the dog's leash. I glanced at them, but I didn't respond. Hours passed. The silence stretched. By the afternoon, Anna finally called. I stayed at the screen, watching her name flash in bright white letters. My finger hovered, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because I had nothing left to say that wouldn't come out sharp and jagged. I let it ring until it stopped. Later that day, I drove to the grocery store. Something about being surrounded by people, even strangers, felt safer than being alone. Yet even there, the quiet followed me. Couples laughed softly in the produce aisle. A woman hummed to herself while comparing cereal boxes. A little boy chatted to his dad about which ice cream to buy. Their voices echoed, while mine stayed locked inside. The cashier asked politely, "How's your day going?" And I stumbled over my answer, muttering something about being fine. The words felt foreign in my mouth, brittle and false. That evening, I tried to distract myself with TV, but the characters' easy banter only reminded me of what I lacked. I muted the volume halfway through and sat there staring at their lips moving on screen, no sound coming through. It mirrored the way I felt, surrounded by noise but trapped in silence. The next morning, I finally forced myself to call Anna back. She answered on the first ring. "Rachel, I was worried. You didn't answer yesterday." "I know," I said quietly. She hesitated. Are you still upset?" I swallowed. "I don't even know what I am. I just feel empty." There was a pause, filled with the faint sound of her dishwasher running in the background. "Mom asked if you were coming by this weekend," she finally said. A bitter laugh slipped out. "Coming by for what?" "So they can forget me in person instead of over the phone." "Don't say that," she pleaded. "You know they love you, just." "Do they?" I cut her off. My voice cracked despite my best effort to keep it steady. "Because I've been replaying the last 30 years, Anna, and all I see are the empty seats, the forgotten calls, the times they looked right through me. That doesn't feel like love." She didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, she said, "Maybe they don't know how to show it." "That's not enough," I whispered, more to myself than to her. We ended the call not in anger, but in exhaustion. That night, I didn't sleep. The silence inside my house was louder than any argument I'd ever had. I lay awake listening to the refrigerator hum, the pipes groan, a car passing outside. Every small sound seemed magnified, like the house itself was reminding me how alone I really was. At 3 a.m., I walked downstairs and made tea, even though I didn't want it. The steam curled up in the dim light, fading into the shadows. I sat at the table and stared at the cup, untouched, until it grew cold. The silence had become more than just the absence of words. It was a barrier, a wall I couldn't climb, keeping me apart from the people I'd spent my life trying to reach. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to break it. 2 days passed like that, short texts ignored, calls left unanswered. Each time I stayed quiet, the weight grew heavier. And yet, some part of me felt strangely stronger for it. For once, I wasn't filling the gaps, smoothing things over, pretending everything was fine. For once, I was letting them feel the absence too. On the third day, I went for a walk through the park near my house. The air was crisp, the kind that hinted at the start of autumn. Families strolled together. Children raced ahead with laughter trailing behind them. I walked slowly, my hands shoved deep in my pockets, watching the leaves scatter across the path. At one point, I passed a bench where an elderly couple sat holding hands in comfortable silence. They weren't talking, yet their quiet felt warm, safe, alive. That was when I realized not all silences weigh the same. Some connect, some suffocate. The one between me and my family had always been the latter, pressing down harder the longer it lasted. When I got home, I found a letter slipped under my front door. The handwriting was unmistakable, my mother's. My chest tightened as I picked it up. It was short, just a few lines, written in her neat, slanted script. "Rachel, we didn't mean to hurt you. Please don't stay away. We'd like to talk when you're ready." I sat at the kitchen table with the letter in my hands, reading it over and over. It wasn't an apology, not really. It wasn't an acknowledgement of the years I'd spent invisible. But it was something. The silence around me seemed to hum louder in its presence, daring me to decide, would I answer, or would I let the weight of silence continue to grow until it crushed us all? I folded the letter carefully and slid it into the drawer beside me. For now, I couldn't answer. The quiet remained, heavy and unrelenting. And yet, deep down, I knew it was only the beginning. The quiet remained, heavy and unrelenting. And yet, deep down, I knew it was only the beginning. 2 mornings later, that truth arrived in the form of a knock at my front door. It was sharp, deliberate, the kind of knock that doesn't wait politely but insists on being answered. For a moment, I stayed frozen in the kitchen, mug in hand, the steam from my coffee curling into the still air. Nobody ever came by unannounced. The knock came again, louder this time. I set the cup down and moved slowly toward the door. Through the frosted glass, I could make out 2 familiar silhouettes, one tall and square-shouldered, the other slightly hunched, clutching something in her hands. My chest tightened. I opened the door. "Rachel," my mother said softly, her eyes darting past me into the house as if checking whether she was welcome. My father stood beside her, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. He gave a curt nod but didn't step forward. For a moment, none of us spoke. The silence between us felt louder than the knock had been. Finally, I asked, "What are you doing here?" Mom held out a small Tupperware container, her old habit of bringing food in place of words. "I made soup," she said. I stayed at it, then at her. "It's August," I replied flatly. Her hand trembled slightly as she lowered it. Dad cleared his throat. "We need to talk," he said. The 3 of us moved into the living room. I didn't offer them coffee or water. I didn't want them to settle in comfortably. They sat side by side on the couch, stiff, like strangers waiting for an appointment. I stayed standing. "What is it?" I asked. Mom smoothed her skirt with shaking hands. "Your cousin Daniel's having trouble with the farm," she began. Well, he might lose it if he can't come up with the money to cover the loan." I felt the words before I processed them, a heavy thud in my chest. So that was why they were here. Not because of the letter I'd left unanswered. Not because of the silence that had stretched like a canyon between us. They had come asking. And my voice sounded sharper than I intended. Dad leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "He needs help. And you, well, you're doing well, Rachel. Better than most." I laughed, short and bitter. "So that's why you're here. You haven't asked me how I'm doing in months, but now that Daniel's in trouble, suddenly I matter." Mom flinched at my tone. "It's not like that," she whispered. "Isn't it?" I shot back, because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like that. Dad's eyes hardened. "Don't make this more difficult than it has to be. His family." "And what am I?" I demanded. My voice cracked, raw. "What have I been to you all these years?" The room went still. Mom's eyes glistened, but she said nothing. Dad leaned back, his jaw tight, his silence as cutting as any words he could have spoken. I turned away, pacing the length of the living room. My thoughts were colliding. Anger, grief, the faint, desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, they had come for me. But no, it was always someone else. Always another need, another person, another excuse. "You don't get to knock on my door and ask me for something," I said finally, my voice low but firm. "Not after everything." Mom's lip trembled. "Rachel, please, this isn't just about money. It's about keeping the family together." I spun back toward her. "The family? You mean the same family that forgot my birthday last year? The one that left me sitting alone at Thanksgiving while you all went to Anna's? That family?" Her shoulders slumped. "We didn't mean to." "But you did," I cut her off. The weight of the silence that followed pressed down on all of us. For the first time, they were the ones unable to fill it. Dad finally broke it. We're not asking you to do it for us. Do it for Daniel. He doesn't deserve to lose everything. And I did. The words slipped out before I could stop them, sharp and unrelenting. He looked away, jaw working, unable to answer. The clock on the wall ticked, each second louder than the last. I could feel the air in the room tightening, every breath sharp against my ribs. I think you should go, I said quietly. Mom's eyes widened. Rachel. I said go. She stood slowly, clutching the container of soup like a shield. Dad rose beside her, stiff and unyielding. Neither of them argued this time. They walked to the door in silence, their footsteps heavy on the hardwood. At the doorway, Mom turned back, her eyes searching mine. We'll call you, she whispered. I didn't answer. I shut the door behind them and leaned against it, my body trembling. For a long time, I stayed there, staring at the soup container left on my table. It sat untouched, the lid fogged from the heat trapped inside. It looked out of place in my home, like a stranger had left their belongings behind. I picked it up, carried it to the trash can, and dropped it in. The hollow thud echoed through the quiet house. But the silence that followed was heavier than ever. I stood there, my palms still pressed against the cool wood of the door, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. For the first time, I didn't cry when they left. I didn't collapse onto the couch or replay every word, wondering if I had been too harsh. Instead, I just breathed, slow, steady breaths that seemed to carve open a new space inside me. The air in the house felt different, sharper somehow, as if it had been clued of a weight I'd been carrying for years. I walked into the kitchen, poured the untouched coffee down the sink, and rinsed out the mug. It was a small act, meaningless to anyone else, but to me it felt like wiping the slate clean. I drifted to the living room and stood at the window. Outside, the world went on as if nothing had happened. The mail truck rattling past, a boy wobbling on his bicycle, the neighbor dragging a garbage can to the curb. Ordinary things. Yet in that moment, they felt extraordinary, reminders that life existed beyond the endless tug-of-war with my family. For so long, I had measured myself against their expectations, their silence, their conditional love. Now, for the first time, I wondered what it might feel like to measure myself against nothing but my own heart. The thought was terrifying and freeing. I sank onto the couch, pulled my knees to my chest, and whispered into the quiet, I choose me. The words startled me. They sounded fragile at first, almost laughable, like something torn from a self-help book. But as they lingered in the air, I repeated them, again, louder this time. I choose me. Something in me shifted. I rose and began moving through the house, picking up clutter, folding blankets, tossing out the stack of unopened letters from my parents that I'd shoved in a drawer months ago. Each action felt deliberate, a declaration. No more waiting for apologies that never came. No more bargaining away pieces of myself to earn scraps of affection. As I scrubbed the counter, my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with Mom's name. I froze, rag in hand, my chest tightening. The call went to voicemail after 4 rings, and almost immediately, another message appeared. We just want to talk. Please, Rachel. I set the phone face down on the counter. For once, I didn't feel the pull to answer. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was mine. Later that afternoon, I laced up my sneakers and stepped outside. The sun was high, the heat pressing down like a blanket. But I welcomed it. I walked to the park at the edge of town, a place I hadn't visited in years. Children shrieked with laughter on the swings, a couple picnicked under the shade of a tree, and the fountain gurgled in the center, its spray catching the light like scattered diamonds. I sat on a bench, letting the warmth sink into my skin, and for the first time in ages, I didn't feel like an outsider looking in. I belonged here, not because anyone said I did, but because I was here, breathing, living, choosing. An elderly woman shuffled past with her dog, pausing to smile at me. Beautiful day, isn't it? She said. It is, I replied, my voice steady. When she walked on, I realized how rare it was for me to answer with ease, without second-guessing my tone or worrying about what impression I left behind. That small exchange felt like another crack in the shell I'd been living under. By evening, I was back home, standing in front of my desk. A blank notebook lay there, untouched for months. I opened it to the first page and wrote 3 words in bold, unshaken letters. I choose me. Then I kept writing. Not letters to them this time, not explanations or pleas. Just thoughts, dreams, pieces of myself I'd been afraid to voice. The words flowed, uneven and raw, but they were mine. Every line was a reminder that my story didn't need their approval to exist. When the sun dipped low, I lit a candle in the kitchen. Its glow spread through the room, soft and golden, chasing shadows into corners. I stood in that light and realized that maybe choosing myself wasn't about grand gestures or cutting ties with a dramatic flourish. Maybe it was about this, deciding, moment by moment, not to abandon myself anymore. The phone rang twice more that night. I didn't answer. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water, carried it to the porch, and sat there under the fading sky. Crickets sang in the grass. The air was warm, threaded with the faint smell of honeysuckle. For once, I wasn't waiting for a knock at the door, for a call, for someone to finally see me. I was already here. I saw myself. As the stars flickered awake overhead, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. Not the heavy silence of disappointment, not the sharp silence of rejection. This was different. This was the quiet of peace, the quiet of finally stepping into my own life.